In the United States, thousands of murder cases remain unsolved, their victims forgotten by all but their grieving families. But in some cases, they refuse to stay buried. Some cases demand answers. This is the story of Linda O'Keefe, a young girl whose disappearance haunted a town for decades and whose voice, silenced too soon, was finally heard through the power of forensic science. On July 6, 1973, Linda Ann O'Keefe, 11, woke up for summer school at her Newport Beach, California home. She put on the dress her mother had made for her. It was a pretty dress with light blue flowers and dark blue trim. She then put a ponytail in her hair, put on her white ankle socks and dark blue shoes, and headed out the door. Her piano teacher would be picking her up that day. Linda was a shy little girl and a Girl Scout who loved painting, crafts, and piano. Her mother said she loved to express herself through drawing and was incredibly talented. She loved laying out in the sun and going to the beach, a true California girl. Linda would often watch TV and keep her room extremely clean, even asking her mother to assess her room after she was done cleaning. She was a sensitive child who had just lost her cat. When her pet died, her mother said it was hard to console her. She took it very hard. Linda had 2 sisters, and she was remarkably close to her eldest sister, an adult who worked in a dry cleaning shop while living at their parents' home. Linda was also a member of the local youth center and normally rode her bicycle to Lincoln Elementary School in Corona del Mar. On that day, however, her piano teacher was giving her a ride to school, so later she walked the short distance home from school. Linda was last seen alive walking home from summer school. A day later, a man searching for frogs in the Back Bay area found her body in a ditch. She had been brutally attacked and strangled. For 45 years, Newport Police Department followed lead after lead, but each turned into a dead end. It seemed like Linda had no voice, but with help from investigators, however, she was about to tell her story. On July 7th, 2018, the 45th anniversary of her death, Newport Police Department announced they would be using DNA technology in the search for her killer. They would also employ a new emotional and psychological tactic to solicit information and tips from the public, maybe from the killer himself. To raise awareness about Linda's unsolved murder and generate tips, the Newport Police Department used Twitter to post what looked like a message sent directly from Linda. More would follow. They ended up producing a series of provocative tweets that described the last day of Linda's life from her point of view. Investigators psychologically targeted the killer by posting pictures of Linda's clothes. Linda had stayed at school through 4 piano lessons that day. After her second class, she went to a local store a block away from her school and bought bubble gum. She managed to return to school before her third class started. After school, Linda wanted to call her mother to ask for a ride home, but the school secretary couldn't let her use the phone at the time and asked her to wait. Instead, Linda went back to Richard's Market, where she had bought gum just hours before. There she saw her friend Brenda. When they each left, Brenda said she was almost hit by a turquoise van, but avoided it by jumping out of the way. A minute later, she saw the van stop near Linda. She was too far away to know if Linda talked to the driver. Though it was not far, Linda hated walking to and from school, and that day she was very upset that her mother would not come for her. Crying, she left the school but did not go straight home, choosing to sit on the corner of Marguerite Drive and Inlet Drive instead. Around 1:15 p.m., less than an hour after Linda called for a ride, Jandy Pierre and her mother spotted Linda talking to a white man in a turquoise van near the intersection of Marguerite and Inlet Drive. The women thought the scene was odd, but didn't think it was dangerous. It was the last time anyone saw Linda alive. That night, a woman living near the area where Linda's body was later found reported hearing screams. She distinctly remembered a woman's voice crying out, "Stop, you're hurting me." When her body was discovered, Linda was still wearing the dress her mother had made for her and was carrying a homemade book bag. The sight of her in the dress her mother lovingly crafted made the loss even more heartbreaking for her family. Linda's parents grew anxious when she did not return home and contacted the police. The search for Linda began immediately, with officers and volunteers combing the streets and surrounding areas. However, with no immediate leads, their efforts were in vain. The following morning, Linda's lifeless body was discovered in a marshy area of Newport Beach. She had been strangled, and an autopsy later confirmed signs of a struggle. The crime scene yielded very little evidence, leaving detectives with few leads. Investigators struggled with the limitations of 1970s forensic science. Although a semen sample was collected from Linda's body, DNA testing was not yet available. The police interviewed multiple witnesses and followed up on leads, but without modern surveillance, license plate tracking, or forensic advancements, they could not identify a suspect. As the weeks passed, detectives received numerous tips, but many led to dead ends. Eyewitness testimonies varied, with some describing different van models and conflicting descriptions of the suspect. The case eventually went cold, leaving Linda's family without answers for decades. The Newport Beach Police Department utilized a unique social media strategy to generate new leads in Linda O'Keefe's case. On the 45th anniversary of her disappearance, they launched a Twitter campaign using the hashtag LindasStory, where they narrated Linda's final day from her perspective. This innovative approach garnered widespread attention and played a significant role in reviving interest in the case. Linda's classmates never forgot about what happened. When #LindasStory was published, they waited anxiously to see if anything would come of it. Terry Briscoe Corwin, one of Linda's former classmates, said, "We were all together on pins and needles waiting to see, who is this guy?" While #LindasStory didn't directly lead investigators to Linda's killer, Sergeant Depweg stated, "It paid off big time as it renewed public interest in the case and helped push the investigation forward." In 2001, authorities entered the DNA profile from the semen sample into CODIS, the National Genetic Database, but no matches were found. Authorities then turned to forensic genealogy, a technique that uses familial DNA matching to identify unknown suspects. A private forensic genealogy firm traced the suspect's family tree, and in January 2019, investigators got a familial match that eventually led them to James Alan Neal, a man living in Colorado. Neal, who was in his mid-20s at the time of Linda's murder, had lived in Orange County, California, when the crime occurred. Under surveillance, authorities collected a DNA sample from Neal, which matched the profile from the semen sample. In February 2019, police arrested Neal at his home, and he was later extradited to California to face charges for Linda's murder. James Alan Neal had a history of violent offenses, including multiple arrests for assault and child-related crimes. Despite this, he managed to evade law enforcement by frequently moving and changing his identity. His criminal history suggested he had been a predator for years, but Linda's case was the first time DNA evidence tied him directly to a crime. James Alan Neal, age 73, was being held at the maximum security Theo Lacey Jail in Orange County, awaiting trial for the 1973 attack and tragic death of Linda O'Keefe. On May 25, 2020, he was transferred to a local hospital due to an undisclosed illness. He passed away in the hospital on July 2020. Authorities stated that there were no suspicious circumstances surrounding his death, and he did not appear to have symptoms of COVID-19. The O'Keefe family, after waiting nearly 5 decades for justice, felt a sense of relief when an arrest was made, but that closure was short-lived. With Neal's passing before trial, there would be no sentencing and no official conviction. Newport Beach Police Chief John Lewis acknowledged the efforts of multiple generations of investigators, stating, "Even though Linda's case never went to trial, the technology and investigative techniques used by the Newport Police Department to identify and apprehend Neal were innovative and effective. Hopefully, these emerging investigative tools will bring new hope to other families of crime victims." Linda's older sister, Cindy Borgeson, reflected on the arrest, saying, "I never really thought they would ever find the individual responsible. After all this time, finding out there is a face and a name just brings additional closure." However, the closure was bittersweet. Their mother, Barbara, carried the guilt of not picking Linda up for the rest of her life before passing away in 2005. Their father, Richard, passed in 2008, never seeing the case solved. If you found this case compelling, we invite you to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps us continue bringing important true crime stories to light on Secrets in the Shadows. Liking this video doesn't mean you approve of the crime. It's simply a way to support our channel so we can keep sharing these cases and giving victims a voice. Justice isn't always immediate, but with persistence, truth has a way of emerging. Rest in peace, Linda O'Keefe. Your story was not forgotten, and justice, though long delayed, finally found its way to you. Thank you for watching Secrets in the Shadows, and we'll see you in the next story.